Hello and welcome once again to episode 118 of Code Completion. We are a group of iOS developers and educators hoping to share what we love most about development, Apple technology, and completing your code. My name is Dimitri, and I'll be your host once again for this episode, and I'm joined today by my fellow completionist, Spencer.
Hey there.
So we're going to start off with a code completion themed section called Deprecation Warning, where we follow up on what we talked about last times. And Twitter is once again a topic for this because they doubled down in their assholisms and decided to outright rewrite their rules and then say, oh, our rules have always been this way, and they have never changed, but we think these top tier clones of the Twitter experience shall not be allowed. So I think I'm done. I don't have anything else to share on Twitter. I don't think. One, I hate their website and I hate their app, and I don't want to experience any of that. So I'm just gonna be posting stuff that redirects to Mastodon until they arrest me for it. I guess that's how I'm going down. But yeah, so long and thanks for all the fish.
Yeah, it's a huge bummer what they've done. I'm with you, I think, as well. I think what I'm gonna do is probably back up my tweets because
Oh, good call. I don't know if that still works, but good call.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna try. I did it a few years ago just to see, but I don't know. It's been a huge part of my life for well over a decade now. So I kind of want to preserve what I've done on there, if only for my own reference, 20 years down the line or something, just for fun. But yeah, I think I'm done too. And unfortunately, Mastodon is not at probably a level where it can scale super well. So every we were just talking about this in the pre-show, but every time I try to use Mastodon, it seems like something doesn't quite work, or it's slow to log in, or on a new device I had to log back in and it took 5 minutes just to go from the main page to the login screen. So
It's charming.
It's quirky for sure. It's got its quirks. But yeah, it's a super big bummer for people the people over at Tweet or at whatever Tapbots and the people that made Twitterific and other Twitter apps, because that was probably just out of left field for them. They didn't see that at all coming, and I'm sure was a fairly significant source of revenue for them, as well as being sort of beloved apps, whether it was Twitterific or Tweetbot. It was, everyone I knew used one of those. So yeah, super big bummer. I know that Tapbots are kind of pivoting over to making a client called Ivory for Mastodon. I don't know what the people who made Twitterific are doing, but yeah,
I think they're just retiring it. They have other apps that they're kind of focusing on.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think, yeah. And Craig Hockenberry and other folks that work at the Icon Factory. But yeah, to give a little bit of a rundown, I think the folks at Tweetbot, which is Paul Haddad and Mark Jadine. Those are probably wrong. Sorry. Sincerely, I hardly ever should ever rely on my memory for anything. But they seem to have seen the writing on the wall, because they did start Ivory quite a ways ago, and we've been both waiting patiently to get a chance to hop on the test flight. That said, it seems like they're focusing on just getting something out onto the App Store by end of January. So if you've also been waiting to try Ivory out, then you should be able to just go ahead and download it and subscribe and support them. If you have been supporting either of these apps via in-app purchase or whatnot, don't cancel. Do cancel your subscription, but don't ask for a refund, because that would essentially cripple these very small companies. I was joking around in our private Slack that I sincerely hope that there is a class action lawsuit against Twitter for this, because this like is blatantly against their own agreements, and is absolutely silly that it's being led to pass. And the only reason it's being led to pass is because the person that's calling the shots is a billionaire who doesn't care about consequences. So I hope that there are consequences, because this is not fair to several small teams, not just Zapbots and Icon Factory, but a whole bunch of other players in the space that were outright encouraged and now defrauded of time and effort, which is not cool at all. So I do hope that there is a class action lawsuit or individual lawsuits. Nothing better than having 17 lawsuits down your back, that would aim to set some precedents for stuff like this. That way billionaires don't get ideas, because it seems like they think that they can do whatever they want. And yeah, I don't think that's cool. So hoping that happens. I don't think it will happen, because these teams are much too small to start a legal battle on their own. So unless there are some enterprising lawyers who want to get a 50% cut of this a very large deal, then I don't think it's going to happen. But it could, and I wholeheartedly support it if it does, because consequences should have, or action should have consequences, especially when they're ill-motivated. On to slightly happier news. It seems like we were totally correct last episode. I don't know if we which details we got wrong, if at all. But there was an event. Thank you, Rumors, for specifying that there would be an event right before we started recording. And it did happen. And there was not only one event, but two events. And by events, I mean press releases with mini videos attached to them. Videos that were from November. So this is stuff that got canceled. Or not canceled, but definitely pushed back. Yeah. And yeah, it seems like we not only have a lot of new stuff, we got new processors. So let's talk about those first. We have the M2 Pro and the M2 Max. Yeah. And M2 Max Mac.
M2 Max Mac. Yeah, it just rolls off the tongue. Never gonna be
not funny. No. Anyways, what's so special about these chips?
Yeah, so I think it offers a meaningful performance uplift. So the M2 Pro has a 12-core CPU and an up to 19-core GPU, which is just the weirdest odd number ever to have, but okay.
It rounds up against at the max, don't worry.
Yeah, I know.
But why 19? That feels like it would be hard to program against. Just saying, as a programmer, never choose odd numbers. No. Whenever there's odd numbers with pixels, it's a mess. So it's don't do it.
Yeah. And it can have up to 32 gigs of memory. The M2 Max is the same core count, 12 CPU cores rather, and 38 GPU cores, so effectively doubling it. And it can have up to 96 gigabytes of memory, which is almost triple, or a little over triple. I don't know. Math is hard. No, it's exactly triple. Okay, cool.
Yeah, math. So that's where I'm kind of confused, actually, because the M2, its memory ceiling was 24 gigabytes. So I was assuming it would go from 16 to 24 for the M2. It would go from 32 to 48 for the M2 Pro. And it would go from 64 to 100 or 96, is it? Mm-hmm. For the M2 Max. It would follow that same linear progression. Yeah. And I'm surprised that the M2 Pro doesn't have that 48 gigabyte here. Was not expecting that.
Yeah, I think my only thinking for that is just where it's placed in sort of that product stack. I'm wondering if the people who buy M2 Pro chips just never upgraded the memory to whatever its max was for the M1 Pro. And so they're there's no point in going all the way up to 48 if very few people are going to use them. That would be my guess, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think I would prefer a model, the M2 Max, that instead of boosting the GPU, just boosted the RAM and CPU. That would be my ideal. Yeah. and I think that would be an ideal for a lot of developers. But I think we're the minority, so it's probably not a big deal in the grand scheme of things. But
yeah,
alas.
I wonder how for the even smaller subset of people that are like game developers on the Mac, how useful those extra cores are. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, catering to an even smaller audience, sort of. But
yeah, do those exist? That's my follow-up question.
Well, I see them in keynotes, so there's at least one of them.
I know a lot of the creative work gets done on iPads, which is like a little mind-blowing if you think about it.
That is.
It's like, hey, the game development work that's designing characters and all that, it's all done on iPads. They're the best digital tablets at the moment. So why not just draw directly on those? That again is probably just finished up on PC, which is a shame for the Apple ecosystem, but that's what it is.
Yes. So yeah, it's I think the biggest thing that is exciting is the 2 extra cores. They're 2 extra efficiency cores, right? They're not performance cores. So we still have
and I think there are models without them. Like you can get a cheap M2 Pro that doesn't have the 2 extra cores or something.
Oh, okay.
Kind of like they did with the M1s, but
yeah. So I'm not sure about this. You pulled up the M2 or the M1 and M1 Pro and M1 Max spec sheets. So sounds like the memory bandwidth is the same, 200 gigabytes, right?
Yep.
So that hasn't changed. It's probably using the same memory, which is, I guess, probably DDR4.
DDR5 now.
Oh, is it
or
DDR5?
LP DDR5?
Right. Yeah. Okay. Cool. It does have a larger cache. So, I mean, incremental upgrades. I don't know. Again, like we talked about, I don't know, a couple episodes ago or something. Even with this now released and having seen it, it's not enough for me to want to like upgrade to it. But if I didn't have it like an M1 Max laptop for work or something, my work would probably just buy this instead, right? Like just whatever it was. So good upgrades all around.
Yeah, and it seems like, as we mentioned in a past episode, we're not sure if the LPDDR5 means that it has error correction or not. It's just a hodgepodge of spec mess. So there's that to look forward to, I guess, in more in-depth reviews, probably by Nantech. And then as for the cache like increases, I think that's what gave Apple Silicon its huge like leapfrog jump from where the industry was to where they just like placed themselves for relatively slow. And I say relatively because I still remember the days when like sub 1 gigahertz was common. But relatively slow processors that got a minor bump in processing speed, so that's good. But like are not like I would say most of the gains come from the memory bandwidth, or not the memory bandwidth per se, but the memory caches that allow the processor to not twiddle its thumbs as much, because there's a certain point where you can like boost your processor to whatever speed you want and it's not going to get the data in time. And there's just latencies inherent to the system that even if you can shuttle data quickly, you still have to wait for it to come and wait for it to like be requested. So I think that is probably what is helping these chips the most. It seems like you're gonna get, at least on the high end ones, like for the M2 Max versus the M1 Max, a 25% increase, which is like, I never like percentages because they don't really mean much. Like if it takes an hour to compile your thing, a 25% increase does not mean you're saving 25% of the time. It means you're saving 20% of the time, because math is stupid. But that's just like something to think about. You're going to be saving like about 10 minutes if it takes an hour. If it takes not an hour, you're gonna if it takes 1 minute, you're gonna save 10 seconds kind of thing. But that can be like a very helpful addition throughout the day, right? For myself, I'm way more interested in having that much higher RAM ceiling. Like 96 gigabytes is super appealing to me because my laptop is like a slodge due to how I work. I like open a lot of things and have my brain scattered all over the place. And that works really well when everything is fast and fluid because I can just jump between things and not lose track of where my train of thought is going. But then as soon as stuff starts slowing down, then I start losing track of what I'm trying to do. And things come to a standstill. So I'm looking forward to the higher RAM ceiling, definitely. More than the processor increase, to be honest.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah, cache can make a huge difference, though. AMD they've kind of done this interesting thing where on the PC side, they're like stacking cache vertically. They call it like their 3D V cache, and it's just basically giving the processor more RAM. They're kind of like special CPUs, but you see like all things equal except for just adding more cache, it like significantly improves workflows and gaming and all that stuff. So the amount of cache is huge. Another thing that I think is true, this is again from like one place that I looked, but from the M1 Pro and Max, the kind of highest clock speed, max clock speed is 3.22 gigahertz, and for the M2 Pro and Max, it's up to 3.48. So slight, not huge, 200 megahertz, a little over 200 megahertz clock speed boost. Which,
hey, that's a quarter of my iBook G4 from back in the day.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a whole computer's worth if the computers are 30 years old, but still. That I'm sure is also helping. So,
yep, incremental improvements,
Yep.
which is good. And this is most exciting because these incremental improvements are making their way to one of the first machines that got introduced to Apple Silicon, but then just kind of was left by the wayside, never to be updated again until now, and that is the Mac Mini.
Yeah. So the Mac Mini's got the M2. And also, they're adding the M2 Pro, which I think is super exciting. We've talked about it before, but the M1 Mac Mini had tons of thermal headroom to have a larger CPU, hotter, faster CPU. So really cool to see that they're kind of going forward with. I mean, they're keeping the same chassis that they've had for like 15 years or something now. It's been a long time.
So it did change. It's like a little bit wider or something. Yeah, there's some minor differences in the size, and I don't have it in front of me, but yeah, they did like. I don't know why they did, because this means like new machines to grind down aluminum. But they did change it ever so slightly.
Okay.
So there's that.
I stand corrected.
There was something that needed more room in there.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. Well, regardless, it's nice that it's getting the M2 at that $600 base price, and then of course, you can add the M2 Pro if you want to go a little higher end, and that's such a sweet little, just for how cute and tiny it is. That's a lot of power. So I always love Mac Minis. I just think it's adorable how small they are, but also functional. Now that there's the M series in them, so.
Yep.
Yeah,
and I think
cool.
this is where that RAM ceiling kind of hurts, is because you can't get the M1 Max or M2 Max in the Mac Mini. You're limited by 32 gigabytes of memory rather than the hypothetical 48 that would have like followed the linear trajectory. So that's a bit of a shame, but it's definitely a big improvement over what was there, and it completely replaces the Intel one. So no more Intel Mac Minis. Which is good. Yeah.
Yeah, and along with that, maybe it's worth mentioning, I think we talked about it before, like one benefit of the Intel Mac Mini is it had 4 Thunderbolt ports, but now the M2 Pro version also has 4 Thunderbolt ports. So
yeah,
we're kind of on par IO wise as well. So and the M2 Pro Mac Mini starts at $1,300. So it's a big increase in price from the M2. But I'm just happy that the M2 or the Mac Mini isn't just relegated to the base Apple Silicon of whatever generation we're on. So I think that's awesome.
This means the most expensive Mac Mini you can buy is $4,500, which is
That's so weird.
a lot. That's with the 8 terabyte SSD, which is like totally overpriced. Sure. But I would say, like, if you just cared about processing speed and not about storage space, you are looking, which, to be 100% clear, with the Mac Mini, you probably don't need to care too much about storage space unless you need to download multiple versions of Xcode. Then you're kind of there's no way out of that one, unfortunately. But yeah, if you can connect an external SSD to this via Thunderbolt, then you're more or less good to get some external storage that's much more affordable, and
way more affordable.
Not necessarily as fast, but maybe you don't need it that fast for those kinds of tasks. So that's definitely something to look forward to, is a $2,000 like really, really fast Mac Mini with just the performance boosted rather than the SSD.
Yeah, I will probably pick one of these up in a couple of years when it's secondhand and about $600 for the M1 or the M2 Pro. I think it's
at that point you can just get the M5 normal and that will be the same speed.
Yeah, probably, that's true. Yeah, I don't know. I have my work MacBook for anything powerful that I need to do for work, and then I just have my MacBook Air and it works fine. So it'd be cool to have a Mac Mini, and especially because I'm almost always working from my desk. My work laptop is basically just a Mac Mini. It just sits in its clamshell mode all day. I don't even use the screen. So that Liquid XDR whatever display, yeah. So along with that, they updated the MacBook Pros, which is great.
Yep.
So M2 Pro, M2 Max in those. So doesn't really seem like the chassis changed, which I know Dimitri's a little sad about, only having 3 Thunderbolt ports still.
That is like the biggest bummer.
Yeah.
Because I wanted that extra port, but it is what it is. Thankfully, we have Thunderbolt hubs now, so that's less of a concern, but still a bit of a bummer.
Yeah. Couple cool things about it. I think it's cool that they're keeping the 14-inch model. That seems kind of like a nothing burger, but I love the size of my 14-inch MacBook Pro. It's so good. I don't need the extra screen real estate. I just like the small, compact, easy to carry size, so that's cool. Wi-Fi 6E. So we finally are on par with the newest iPad Pro. HDMI 2.1, which I think is sweet. So that can do 4K at 240 hertz, right?
Yep.
And then 8K at 60 hertz. So kind of slightly future-proofing us for the inevitability of, the Liquid Retina or the whatever Pro Display XDR 2 that has 8K or whatever. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Or my fabled super ultra wide 8K quote unquote monitor. So
yeah, there are some limitations with the displays depending on like if you get the M2 Pro versus the M2 Max in terms of how many displays you can run. So do keep that in mind if you are loaded with 6K displays already, I guess. You can't run 3 of them with the Pro, I don't think. That one is limited to 2. And I'm not sure if you can run the HDMI at 8K along with other displays. It's very like ambiguously worded, so we're gonna have to wait for the YouTubers to get their hands on these to let us know exactly which configurations actually work. But yeah, it seems like they're boosting the capabilities all around, little by little, right? And this is exactly what we as users of Apple stuff have been hoping for, right? Spec bumps, just incremental improvements. They don't need to change the chassis. I don't know why they changed the chassis on the Mac Mini, but they don't need to change the chassis on the MacBook Pro at all because it just has the headroom available to it. And like every other processor generation is getting some sort of increase in improvement for how it's being built, right? And that allows it to get better over time.
Yeah, definitely. The 14-inch with the M2 Pro starts at $2,000. 16-inch with the M2 Pro starts at $2,400. So that's like a fair increase just for the display. I think the display is also like a little bit brighter or something or whatever. But I mean, they're pricey, but they do good work. At least my M1 Max does. There was something else I wanted to mention. They are kind of going to be arriving to people and also available in Apple stores on January 24th, which is probably the day that this is going to come out, or the day after, depends on when I edit this. So we might follow up next week or something to see, what, like Dimitri said, what YouTubers and reviewers say. So
yep,
it's exciting though.
It's definitely exciting. The most important change to these laptops is you now get a matched braided cable for the charger if you get the space gray version. So that's something to
was it not
look
matched?
forward to. It is not matched up until now.
It's just aluminum?
Yeah. I bought some extras from the MacBook Air generation, mostly because my cat chewed through the power cables, as they have chewed through many things in my life. But I still love them because they're cute and fuzzy and they sleep on me, and that's like enough to change me over.
Sleep on me.
But yeah, the 16-inch can cost up to $6,500 if you go all out.
Love it.
So that's wonderful. That's a very expensive slab of aluminum that you can own. I think the biggest I don't want to say F you, but the biggest bummer about these machines costing so much is, say you bought an M1 Max MacBook Pro fully loaded, 4TB SSD, all the RAM, and you wanted to trade it into Apple. You can get $1,500 for that after 18 months, which is hilariously undercutting it. So if you do plan on upgrading because that 20% decrease in time is important to you, then definitely go ahead and check out alternatives, because the Apple trade-in is not going to do you service in that regard. I expect it to go down by $2,000, but I think you should still be able to get $3,000 to $4,000 for a maxed out M1 Max Mac. Yeah, that's just personal opinion. I personally am not going to be selling mine, nor am I going to be buying a laptop personally. I may receive one from work, so if I do, then I can go ahead and give a review for that. But yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to potentially having 96 gigabytes of RAM, because the 64 hurts when you have lots of Safari windows open.
Yep, that's fair.
One thing I know, going backwards a little bit to the Mac Mini before we move on, there are no more space gray Mac Minis available. And I wonder if that means that there is a hole in the lineup for a more powerful Mac Mini potentially to come out. What do you think?
That'd be cool. I think the only thing with that is the more powerful Mac Mini to me feels just like the Mac Studio. I don't know if they would encroach on what the Mac Studio is already with the M2 Max, right? When they refresh the Mac Studio. Where my mind went with that was, I wonder if they're gonna maybe eventually do colored Mac Minis.
Ooh, that would be really nice.
Cool. I would love that.
I may or may not splurge and buy one of every color in that case.
Oh my gosh, dude!
That'd be so pretty.
I was gonna say, I would splurge to get one too, and you're just like, I'll buy all of them.
So I then need to motivate why I need 6 Mac Minis, right?
Yes.
That would be the follow up to that. It's I set off on this adventure. Now I need to massively paralyze something. So let's do that.
Yeah. It'd make a good mini supercomputer cluster thing.
I mean, okay, so on that topic, the eagle-eyed among us may have noticed that in the video that showed off the new MacBook Pros and Mac Minis and M2 whatnot. So this is a video that was made back in November once again. But that video used to have racks and racks of Mac Pros, like the server-mounted ones. And those racks seemingly have been replaced with shelves of Mac Minis, 8 per row.
Yeah.
And I absolutely endorse this setup for how clunky it is. Like, don't go to Sonnet and buy like a $7,000 chassis for your Mac Minis. They stay vertically. It turns out they have flat edges. They just stay there. They don't move. Like, just put them on a shelf. But do give them a little bit of air. And do stack a lot of them in a server rack because they give you a whole lot of bang for your watt in terms of raw performance and processing and space. Yeah. Like, I don't think you can get a Linux server that has that much processing capability within that space. You absolutely can get like more storage. Like they pack hard drives very well. But in terms of packing CPUs, like that is not really a thing. Mostly because they get so hot and they need so much power. But Mac Minis, they're cheap. They just need a lot of power outlets. You'll probably need a bundle of switch in your little like modular setup. I'm thinking of Factorio now, where you have to make like a blueprint of like exactly the components that you can just like copy paste from there. But yeah, I can imagine just get a 16 port switch with like some uplink that's really, really fast. Get 16 Mac Minis, put them in that shelf. Front and back, and then you have a nice 6U kind of component that you can do a lot of work on very effectively. So if you are in the space of messing around with like high compute and you like using Apple frameworks for stuff, like consider that. Also consider setting up a cron job that restarts the computers every now and then because Mac OS, oh boy. But the the hardware is excellent.
Going back to probably not having ECC RAM.
Yeah. But maybe it has ECC RAM. Who knows? That's like one of those magical moments that you can just like YOLO it. But yeah, I think that's really a cool setup to put together. I think we won't have anything like that if Apple were to come out with like an Xserve replacement. So it's still something that's possible with these. It's a shame that it's kind of clunky that you have to like just arrange stuff on a shelf rather than do anything productive with like, oh, this just slots in and it has everything. The Mac Pro is kind of wasted in that regard because it's mostly empty space in that regard, unless you really have stuff to put in there. But yeah, definitely thumbs up that solution. Mac Stadium definitely likes that solution. In fact, they don't use server racks; they just use shelves with lots of Mac Minis on them. So
you could like 3D print some stands, I guess, if you really wanted to. I'm sure someone's made something like that for high density Mac Minis.
Yeah, it's not like they're gonna melt. These machines will run on nothing. So definitely a cool little machine. A little awkward in how like people have discovered that you could do stuff like this, but definitely A+ there. That said, talking about weird little machines, we got a very surprise second day announcement, and I almost thought that Apple's going to do like, hey, we're going to do announcements all week, like they did that one time. But yeah, we have a new HomePod.
Yeah, the full fat HomePod, which is great.
I think it got a little fatter, right? It's a little fatter and a little shorter. Is what they said, or did it get taller? It's like there's some difference in the size.
The screen, the glass part on the top maybe looks a little bit bigger. I'm not sure. They look really similar though. It's kind of the same aesthetic going on, which is great. I think it looks great. Yeah, so I think the biggest thing with it is it's got like Matter support, which I think is huge. So kind of setting up for all of the, Matter being the new home standard, being able to, handle all that and just kind of be a hub for that. It's got, along with actually the HomePod Mini, it has temperature and humidity sensors built in, which is interesting.
Yeah, the HomePod Mini got that just enabled via Magic like next week, because they were there all along, it turns out.
Yeah.
What was it that Apple like charged $1 to everyone to enable? Was that FaceTime on the Mac, I think? Because that was like a feature that they didn't market directly, and then due to the way that they did financing, they had to like charge for new features, and they thought that was dumb, but they're like, okay, everyone, if you want FaceTime, just pay us $1, and then you bought it.
I think I remember
and
that.
like
back
Steve
in,
Jobs was like very very snarky about it. That's what I remember.
I think you're right. That sounds. I think I remember that in the App Store just being 99 cents. I think that's right.
Yeah, I'm super glad they didn't need to do this for the HomePod Minis. But yeah, you get temperature and humidity sensors built in, which makes my Ching Ping little air quality monitor, whatever, 17S5, whatever they're called, a little obsolete because they sit right next to them. But those also check for actual air quality, so I think I'll be keeping them.
Nice. I read somewhere, and I don't know if this is true, but it sounds like the speakers are actually smaller than the original HomePods.
Yeah, there's fewer tweeters, I think.
Oh, okay.
So that said, a lot of people seem to be confident that will like result in more or less the same sound quality out of these. So, it remains to be seen. The YouTubers once again will let us know if Apple has like ruined everything, in the traditional way of reporting on stuff.
They ruined everything by just axing the HomePod out of nowhere. So I think bringing it back at all is good. Comes out on the 3rd of February, so got a little bit more time to wait than the new Macs. Of course, they talk about how you can pair two up and have a great sound system for your TV and stuff. Dimitri, I said, hey, it would be great if I could only buy one of these and keep my original HomePod and pair them up. Dimitri did some research. That's not possible, which is a super bummer because I'm not going to drop $600 for, two of these. I already have one and it works fine. So, not that I use it for TV. But
they need to be paired with the same generation, and that goes with the mini HomePods and the old HomePods as well.
It makes sense. Yeah.
That said, if you do want to pair it with your TV, it works surprisingly well. Like, it will accept all ARC input from your TV. So if you switch to your Nintendo Switch and start playing a game, you might assume, the latency is going to be bad on this one, but no, it just works. Cool. The TV volume goes through to the Apple TV, which is sleeping, and then raises the volume on the HomePods, and you get great sound out of that. I don't know what that compares to with like a full sound system. Probably a full sound system is better, but maybe not. Just like the way Apple has computationally like outdone the better cameras with their cameras, they can potentially do something better with smaller speakers. So, I really don't know how it compares. All I can say is my living room sounds good with the old HomePods. That said, the old HomePods, the right one decides not to listen to volume control anymore. So that's just like at a constant volume until you'll walk up to it, reach up on the shelf, and like plus, or minus.
That's a bummer.
So I don't know if that's the HomePod. I don't know if that's my crazy Unify setup. All sorts of HomeKit stuff has like gone haywire this week at the same time, so probably all related. But it's like bad timing for the HomePod because I am eyeing the new ones as a fix, and that's never a good sign. So that said, cheaper, right? They no longer start at $350, which was the outrageous price. Now they're just less outrageous, I guess. But this is what like Best Buy and stuff were selling the old ones for. So I'm glad that they took a hit on that. Those two tweeters were not worth it, I guess.
So, yep. And I guess the last thing I should mention, because I talked about this when we were kind of speculating on a new HomePod, is it also has like the wireless, like send your music over to
the Tap
to the HomePod, which is cool because I've actually been using it a lot more. I moved my HomePod Mini into my kitchen, so like when I'm cooking food or whatever, I'll like just tap it over to that, and it it's kind of nice. A little bit faster than
Yeah, quick question with that. If you're in one room and you tap it in that room and it's not playing in that room, and then you go to the kitchen and tap it there, does it play in both, or does it not move anything, or does it move it over?
I've only been using it like when I've been listening like on my AirPods or just from my phone itself.
Got it.
Not from like a separate room. I only have one HomePod Mini, so I don't know. I would assume it stops playing, but I haven't tested it.
Got it.
But it stops playing from my phone.
Something to try out, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, last thing we should mention: these are faster. They are not slow. If you own HomePods and HomePod Minis, you may have immediately noticed that the HomePod's not very fast. The HomePod Mini is much, much faster. And this is something that you can look forward to because they're faster than HomePod Minis via the grace of the S7 chip from Apple Watches. So, yeah, these do not get Wi-Fi 6E. I don't think they need it. But they do get Wi-Fi N, and they are capable of joining the new like Wi-Fi standard or Wi-Fi network standards, which I have tested locally here. Like my old HomePods are on the newer network that only supports WPA3 and stuff like that. So that all seems to work fine. So you're not being limited by these only supporting 802.11n or Wi-Fi 4. I don't know. It's so hard to keep track with the numbers now.
Yes.
But yeah, it should be a much faster experience. I may no longer need to have a HomePod Mini next to my stereo pair of HomePods for the living room because they were atrociously slow. And anytime we were watching anything and we asked, like, what's the weather outside, all audio would just duck for the show for like a good 20 seconds. And it's like, well, I don't know what's going on anymore. Nothing paused. It just keeps going. And then the audio is just like very muted while Siri is thinking. So that's why I have a HomePod Mini there. And that is a reasonably good setup if you can put it together.
Nice.
But yeah. Go HomePods.
Yeah, happy it exists again.
So out of this trifecta of things, are you getting anything?
Probably not. No. No.
Sounds good.
Yep. How about you?
Same here. I was considering the HomePods as mine were wigging out on me. That says probably some network thing that I just need to fix. And it's not at all related to the HomePod. So there's that. I was considering the Mac Mini with the 4 Thunderbolt ports. But then I remembered the reason I didn't want to... or the reason why I wanted 4 Thunderbolt ports was because I am using 2 of them for the big raids. The main one and the backup. And I needed a third to have 10 gigabit Ethernet. But then I remembered, hey, I did consider getting an M1 with 10 gigabit Ethernet, like built in because they added those afterwards, after the fact. And I didn't because I didn't want to mess around with ACLs because ACLs seemed very daunting and scary. So my RAID sits untouched. It's been updated since and it seems stable, so I'm just going to leave it. And yeah, it's on slower Ethernet, but tis what it is until I finally decide to update that. Thankfully, my network is rock solid from a speed point of view for that when I eventually do update that. But yeah, I no longer need more Thunderbolt ports, so I'm no longer eyeing that M2 Pro Mac Mini, which would have been around $1,000, I think. So yeah.
Cool. That's awesome.
It's been a cheap Apple event week this time around.
Which is good. Always welcome.
This week's episode of Code Completion is brought to you by Weekly Swift Exercises. There's no substitute for practicing when you're learning Swift. There's dozens, literally dozens of people Fernando's mentored through different programs, and he's seen it time and time again. After you learn the basics of programming, you slow down because learning through experience is demanding and painful. Increasing your confidence is key, and there's an easy way to do it: practice. Fernando's weekly exercises help you practice concepts like closures and protocols while implementing actual features like dark mode. It's free to join. Besides the exercises, Fernando sends 1 or 2 articles about learning Swift. Some are technical in nature, but most of them will help you in your career by teaching you things like best practices, working as a team, and getting ready to get your first job. Thanks again to Fernando and Weekly Swift Exercises for sponsoring Code Completion. Go to twitter.com/Swift Exercises today to learn more. So Spencer, I've got a code completion tip for you, and that is documentation markup. So when you're writing Swift code, you might have added documentation / here, /star, mumble, / there, and that adds like some helpful pointers to what your code is doing, right? But if you added one more extra slash or one more extra star, you get superpowered documentation markup. And this is actually rendered by the default Xcode theme in a proportional font, so it immediately looks different, and you know you're in a special mode that's geared towards productivity and writing lots of words. And one of the things that it gives you is the ability to add markdown. So you can go ahead and bold words, you can italicize words, you can code span words, you can make code span links with double backticks, which will jump to other parts of your code. And when you're auto-completing this code that you've documented, it will go ahead and give you that documentation that you wrote as if it were part of the default documentation that the rest of Swift ships with. So this is a very good way of adding context to any method that you're writing, and explain what it's going to do in words rather than in code. So I really like that you can like switch to an actual proportional font here. I wish that it was a little bit more intelligent about like the code gutter. Like I don't know if you use soft wrapping or not. I personally do, but I like my windows wide because code sometimes is long, and let it use the amount of space that it needs, right?
Right.
That said, doc comments, they don't need that amount of space. It makes them hard to read. So it would be great if Apple like had a soft wrap for doc comments, which was separate than the one for code. Just that way you can type your paragraph and it looks like a paragraph. You don't need to insert new lines like a cave person. But we still got to be a little bit cave people. But now we have nice typography to go along with it. So we can be cave people with type blocks that we're hammering into the wall, I guess. So that's my tip for this week. I think doc comments are a great way to make your code more readable and more importantly discoverable after the fact. So you're not looking at that code and they still show up. You can option click anything and it shows up. And this is immediately noticeable when most of it is documented and some part is not, because then all of a sudden you rely on it and then you option click something and nothing shows up, and that's like horrible. So
nice. I was looking through my bookmarks. I couldn't find it, but I had a blog post. I think it was by Matt and a Hipster, I think. That it was like it ran through all of the keywords that you could do in those doc comments to like format it even more and stuff. So I'll try to find that for the show notes and stuff. But the doc comments are super powerful. Nice. I like it.
And add it to our show notes because I saw that in Google search like earlier.
Oh, nice.
But I don't know if these same comments work in Objective-C. That said, I have not used Objective-C in like a year.
No.
So, sorry.
That's a good question. You know what? Off the top of my head, I think there is something similar, but I think you have to do like, for like parameters, it's like @param or something like that.
Yeah, it's a slightly different flavor.
Yeah.
It's changed over the years, but this one is like supported by Swift, the open source project. So this one is likely not to change. Whereas all the others were like other tools that were kind of adopted over time and not adopted and switched over. But because this is part of the Swift project itself, I think it would stand the test of time a little bit better. Right? Sure. As always, I want to personally thank everyone for listening in this week. Please be sure to follow us on mastodon.social at Code Completion to know when new episodes go live, and feel free to toot at us if there's ever a topic you'd like for us to dig into. Most importantly, as a small podcast, please be sure to share this with your friends and family who are also interested in any part of the process of app development. It's your support that enables us to continue doing this, and we hope to grow a healthy community around everything we discuss. Once again, I want to give my thanks to Spencer, who is at Spencer C. Curtis. That's SpencerCurtis, for joining me this week. My name, once again, is Dimitri. You can find me at Dimitri Buñol. That's DimitriBouniol. And we'll see you all next week.
Bye.
Bye.